Did you hear that?
Right.
You want to put our hands up?
Okay, so your microphones are now working, so if you could please use those. So moving on, there's no presentations today, no notification of late items or recommendations from committees. So we can go straight to the minutes from other committees. These are for your information. And the one on the table today on page 12 is the District Development Committee. You have the minutes there in front of you for your information, but I'm going to ask Councillor Ford as the chair for District Development just for any highlights, given that this is a reasonably new standing committee.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. I guess we had 18 presentations from organisations within our community that we give some funding to, who I think generally impressed us greatly with the great work that they do for the different parts of our community. And for those who've been on the Community Development Committee previously, I guess they were used to it. For some of us, hearing those presentations for the first time, I think we were very impressed. So that was the point that I'd like to make.
Thank you. So are there any questions or comments from those minutes? No, thank you. We'll take that as for information. So moving on to officers' report, we're on page 24. And this is the CEDA final statement of intent. So Lynn, I'll leave it to you to lead this one out.
Worship. Actually, it's Marie that's going to speak to.
Welcome, Marie.
Thank you. Good morning. So the CEDA's final statement of intent 23-24 is largely a technical paper that we have agreed with Palmerston North City Council together. The MDC and Palmerston North Council feedback has largely been incorporated into the statement of intent, and we're asking the elected members to approve the statement of intent. And CEDA are also here to answer any questions if needed, and we welcome Jerry Sherman, the CE, and Bobby McPhee, our chair.
Thank you. Thank you. Before I open it up for questions or comments, Jerry or Bobby, is there anything that you would like to add to this or highlight? Just while you're moving up there, what I like about the statement of intent is the way it's been set out under the pillars of business, people and place. So it makes it very clear, defines the areas that CEDA works in, and then moving through the document, the objectives and the performance measures.
I think, Your Worship. No, look, there's nothing major other than just to reiterate that this is the first time going through this process without the Joint Strategy Committee. So it's created a sort of a new way of doing things, which has largely landed fairly well. And the changes we've taken through are ones that were sort of obvious and prudent. I don't think we've not done anything that's going to be impactful. We started doing the planning for next year around this already, really excited about what that new level of detail in the measurements looks like, and just ready to hook our teeth into it come July 1.
Thank you. So the question I have is, this is a one-year statement of intent, and I'm all for letting organisations get on and do stuff. So my question is, have we looked at, and is it possible to look at around legislation and all the restraints we have around that, to maybe look at a 3-year contract, a statement of intent, so that we're not constantly spending time on this rather than actually doing stuff?
I can respond to that, Your Worship. That is something that Palmerston North City and ourselves are looking at present. That was a question that Council asked us to go away, or both councils asked us to go away and look at. And Palmy's legal team have had an initial look at the Local Government Act, and they think it is possible. There's just one thing that they're checking. So we'll be able to come back and report to Council where we can go with that.
That would be great for all parties, so I follow that one with interest. Let's open it to questions, comments on the statement content. Councillor Hadfield.
Actually, thanks, Your Worship. Just a comment, actually, and I sort of wonder with the demise of the joint committee between Manawatu District and PNCC, that this whole process hasn't become a little bit more convoluted than it needs to be. Because it seems to me that whilst the joint committee may not have been the be all and the end all, it did provide an opportunity for a representative group of elected members from both councils to actually deal with issues of significant interest to both parties. And I think in all of this process, we're actually missing some simple way of actually going about doing some of this business.
Thank you. And if I recall the intention following on from that, the intention always was that a report would come back to both councils about a way forward for that committee on exactly what you say, issues that impact the region.
Well, and on that basis, Your Worship, we'll look forward to it.
Any other questions or comments? Councillor Blackmore.
Thank you. Mine's more just a comment. And it's really related to some of the statement in our vision around Manawatu, a world-leading agri-hub. And I think that perhaps over the next 12 months, we might look to rethink that, because I believe it's quite limiting. I believe we should be leading in food and fibre, which is much agriculture, is not horticulture, it's not viticulture. So there's opportunity in there. And I think with the food strategy, we might see our opportunities for that vision to evolve. Thank
I
you.
think that's a really good point. Look, we changed that at the last strategy workshop for the board and the leadership team from, I think it was the world's top 3 agri hubs or agri-tech hubs. And what we subsequently found out was that we were trying to work out how we'd evidence it. And that's where being a retired scientist is a bit painful. And we found out that its origin was in a marketing pitch from an agency about 4 years ago. So it was never a thing, for want of a better description. So how would you take where Massey ranks, where CRIs rank, where we rank across the board, and sort of coagulate that into a ranking? So we did take that, turn it from agri-tech into agri-hub and take it away from being a number. But I think you're right, the food strategy, which, just to give a quick update on that, is currently in final design, but just waiting on the last bit of Māori and Māori agribusiness consultation to happen, which just is a process that takes time. And when that's released, we will be able to come forward with a implementation plan, which will, I think, then we can reflect on what that statement might look like in terms of our vision.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Councillor Belsky.
Yeah, I just want to echo Councillor Hadfield's words. I think it was good meeting both councils and talking about issues, and it combined CEDA's way forward. And so I just thought I'd just back Councillor Hadfield's statement. Thanks.
Thank you. And really, just in wrapping this up, I think this whole food and fibre is something that CEDA is investigating really well. And this weekend, Grant Smith, myself and Jerry, and I'm not sure if there's anyone else from CEDA, two from CEDA, we're going down to Christchurch to attend the BOMA conference, the Food and Fibre, which Manawatu put a bid in for the next one, and we were successful. So that is a significant conference, bringing leaders in food and fibre to our region. So this, even this step of being able to secure this conference is significant. So I'm looking forward to that. Councillor Bell.
Tēnā tātou, ka mihi atu ki ngā ringaropa o CEDA. I'm really enjoying reading the plan. I just have one little amendment. Just on page 57, just have a typo in Awawha. So if you swap the W and H, it'll make sense. So that's under an innovative and growing city. He taone Awawha, just around the wrong way. So if we can make that amendment, then you're perfect. But your reo looks really great. Well done.
Thanks, Bridget.
Councillor, I just wanted to let you know we've just recently come back from a trip to the States. Went to Palmerston North Sister City in Missoula, and we met with the Salish Kootenai Indigenous population there, and they're very excited about coming to the Palmerston North Boma Itapu conference to do an Indigenous food plenary session. So we're working on that with Rangatane, and we'll obviously bring in the iwi from the side of our rohi as well. It's in early days, but I think it would be an absolutely awesome thing to get to this conference if we can do it. So
That sounds exciting. Please keep us updated.
we'll do.
We would love to, iwi would love to partner in that space.
Awesome. I thought you're meeting with Tainui this week, I think, aren't you?
Exciting. Yes. Yes, we are. Thank you for announcing that for everyone. I'm kidding.
Bobby, so. Green, yep.
Yep, got it. Thank you. Just wanted to comment on Councillor Hadfield and Councillor Belsky's comments around the joint strategy and Your Worship, your comments about, you know, coming back on a plan on how we could address that. And I think that ties in also, and I think, Mayor Helen, you're aware that I'm very much in favour of more of a 3-year statement of intent. And I think as we work through that, that would become part of that. So if we're going forward for, say, for my mind, a 3 or a 5-year statement of what we actually need to achieve over that period, that would come in more with that. And that's certainly something I'd be looking for, how we can have that involvement at that stage. So that we, as you say, we're not doing this every 6 months, which does seem to take up quite a bit of time. You know, we do the draft, and every year, but our projects are big projects. They're not, you know, we do have some that obviously tick over every year, like the, you know, the Boma next year, but a lot of our projects are really big projects. And so, you know, we want to align our reporting and our statement of intent with that.
Thank you. So work in progress, which is great. Councillor Ford.
Thank you. I'm very pleased with where we've got to with the statement of intent, and Your Worship, I'm happy to move that the Council receive the Central Economic Development Agency final statement of intent 2023 to 2024.
Thank you. Do I have a seconder, please? Councillor Blackmore, thank you. No further discussion? Put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against? Motion is carried. Thank you. Thanks, team, and good work. Keep it up and look forward to working with you.
Exciting times.
It is. Thank you. And it was really good that you were here to hear the presentation that Richard Anderson gave, and, you know, I can see some synergy with CEDA. Sure.
Look, I thought that presentation was fantastic, and whether it goes down that route or not is obviously a council decision, but just to make it very, very clear that Kaukau Road, Turners Road is inside the conversations around Te Utanganui. And only, in fact, last month we had a catch up with a potential infrastructure investment partner that is right in the sweet spot. And one of the challenges that we face across both of our jurisdictions is how do we have every single available commercial model to make sure that investors can invest in the way they want. So I thought that was a cracking presentation.
Thank you. Thanks, team. So in a similar vein, we go to 11.2. This is the Manawatu Community Trust final statement of intent. Welcome, Tyson and your team. Come and join us at the table. Just grab a chair, pull it up. We're on page 73.
Thanks.
Thank you. So you have the statement intent in front of you. So Marie, I'll hand it over to you.
So again, this is a technical paper to finalise Manawatu Community Trust Statement of Intent. Discussion on the draft has already been considered, and Manawatu Community Trust are here if you have any questions on their final.
Thank you. Thank you. And of course, I'm going to start with the same one I did with CEDA about, you know, can we look at how do we extend this into a potentially a 3-year statement of intent so you can carry on with the good work that you do. And having read through the objectives that you've set out there, which are fantastic. The question I have is, given the current climate state of New Zealand, and it's not looking any brighter anytime soon, how achievable do you think those goals are going to be?
I think it'll be a stretch to reach our 250 by 2030, but I think there's some good news that Teresa has. So Teresa and the trust got interviewed by the Community Housing Registration Authority. So I'll let Teresa actually speak about that, because that'll make it a lot easier, and the affordable housing feedback as well.
Yeah, so that is one of our key strategies, the 250 homes by 2030, and that is only now 7 years away. So, these things do take a lot of time, and we have some land banked already to help support that, and we're also in talks with two private people who have land that they would like to sell and partner with us on in developments as well. So definitely will still be a stretch, but not necessarily unachievable. And so alongside that, you're aware that we've been working on a CHIP entity. So that now has progressed to the point where we have been accepted to go ahead and put our application in. So in many respects, the hard part, getting all the technicalities on that, has been done, and now it's paper exercises. So working with also MHUD, we've made two proposals for funding, one for 2.2 million and one for 4.5 million. And both of those have been endorsed as projects that they will in the future fund for us. So we haven't gone through the whole process of that. They've endorsed it in principle that that we as an organisation meet their criteria in terms of, how our quality control processes, our financial sustainability, and what we're proposing is realistic and meets the needs of our community. So I'm not sure, hopefully that answers your question, that we're on track, but we still do have some challenges ahead of us in terms of timing of that delivery.
That's awesome news, more than on track. That's outstanding, given how long, I know in the time I've been in this role, we've been talking with government, but you've gone a step further with some of those other bigger projects, and putting your hand out for government to come in and partner with us. So well done to the team for that. Open it up for questions, comments. Councillor Short.
Thank you. That's very positive news. Hopefully that happens in a nice timely fashion and you can just get on with it. So that's great news. But as well as focusing on the future, I just wanted to check how we're getting on with the housing that you already own. I see you've got a goal for everything to be 3-star. Where are you with your existing housing? Because I know you haven't completed all your unit upgrades. How much more is there to do?
Yeah, so I think one of our strategic goals is around maintenance and improving those existing housing stock in terms of LifeMark standards, which is around accessibility for our tenants and making them up to date in terms of how people of that age need spaces to live in. So over the last 12 months, and this relates to the COVID-19 where people didn't move around as much as previously, we have had quite a shift. So we've had 30 tenants in 1 year move for various reasons, to be with families or to go into rest homes, and a few that have passed away. So that has meant it's given, on the one hand, an opportunity to do a lot of opportunistic upgrades. So as I say, 30 have been upgraded, not necessarily to LifeMark standards as we would have liked, because of the need to push those through quickly and get people homed. But there has been one project in particular that we have worked on as a kind of a trial to look at what that costs and the timeframes and what have you, and that one's nearly completed in terms of coming up to those LifeMark standards. And, you know, doing that retrospectively is quite a big job and takes a bit of planning. And also our Rāwhiri complex, which is one of our oldest complexes, that is undergoing quite a big capital project, which has just started, and that's around improving access, making the sheds able to accommodate mobility scooters, putting power to the sheds, widening the footpaths, putting ramps in. It'll also get a new roof shortly and some painting work. So yeah, that's quite a big capital project that's going on as well. So yes, we're making some.
And we're ahead on our heat pumps and.
Yep,
Yeah.
we are. So we will have all our healthy homes compliance in place by June 2024, which is a year now ahead of what the requirement is.
Well done. Councillor Hadfield.
Yeah, thanks, Your Worship. Yeah, funny enough, I'd sort of looked at those targets. You know, 24 to 25 plus 3, and then 25, 26 plus 2, and then 27 to 30 plus 30. And I thought, oh, my first thought was it's a bit like calling a racehorse linger longer and expecting the bugger to win. But you know, thanks for your answers on that, because I think, you know, it's the old story. I think we need to be smarter about how we dig into the taxpayer pothole and look for those things. The other comment I'd just make, a bit like Worship, I think statement of intent every 12 months is sort of, again, getting bogged in bureaucracy and actually not getting on with the job, in my view. And it would, at least in my view, make sense to work on the political cycle, because at the end of the day, as much as everything's controlled by the political cycle, even sometimes that's actually a deterrent in itself. But it is actually a better mark, in my view, than just doing stuff for the sake of doing it every 12 months. So just my view.
Thank you. The other question I had was just around, it's mentioned in here, but commentary around the health centre. It's great to see the Cleverley wing fully functioning and vibrant, which is great. Can you give us an update on plans? What's the next for the health centre?
Well, I understand that the men's shed is wanting to expand its operation, so it's actually working really well. So it's wanting to actually do a little bit more out the back there. I understand the health centre is planning probably 5 years ahead to have another extension there. I suppose the question for the trust is, when we first built that thing and council asked us to do that, there was a real community need for it. Have we fulfilled that community need, and just expanding extra onto it? Is that really a trust job, or is that should be someone else's? Should we actually focus more on housing? So we're having those conversations. Also, the land isn't the community's yet. It's still held by Te Whatu Ora. Good luck if you can find anyone to talk to in Te Whatu Ora. We're certainly trying to, but we may just have to start to talk to others, because we really like that land to be in community ownership rather than held by the Health New Zealand, because it really should be ours that could be used for health in other ways. So we're juggling those sort of conversations right now.
Excellent. That's great news. Okay, so if that's the end of questions and comments, there is a recommendation on page 73. If I could have a mover and a seconder, please. Councillor Ford.
Your Worship, I move that the council agrees to the Manawatu Community Trust final statement of intent 2023 to 2024.
Thank you. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Short. No further discussion. I'll put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against? Motion is carried. And again, well done. That's great achievement with the CHIP status, and good luck with the funding projects as well. So well done to you and all of your team.
Thank you. Your Worship, just one final thing. There will be a paper coming to council shortly in support of the CHIP status. There'll be some changes that we'll need to adopt as a result of that.
Great. Look forward to it. Thank you. So we now move to item 11.3. We're on page 88, and this is the adoption of our development and financial contribution policy and the development contribution fees for the financial year 1st of July 2023 to the 30th of June 24. And as you know, this is today's coming to us for the adoption of the discussions and the review that's been taking place.
No, where?
Thank you. The comment's just been made. It's great not to have to see there is no lawyer with you today.
She's hot. She's at the back listening.
Have you seen my CV? Noted.
Thanks, team. I'll hand it over to you.
Good morning, Mayor and councillors. Today we are asking you to adopt the Development and Financial Contributions Policy 2023 and the associated fees for the financial year 1st of July 2023 to 30th of June 2024. So I'll take you through a bit of background. So we prepared the draft Development and Financial Contributions Policy alongside Council over July 2020 to 4th of February 2021. We received 10 submissions on the draft policy. 9 of these submitters spoke to Council at hearings. In addition to issues raised by submitters, a number of operational matters and points of clarification and editing were identified by officers, with corresponding post-consultation changes made. These changes were to ensure the policy is user-friendly for administrators, consistent throughout, and reflective of its overall intent. Council considered and made decisions on the matters raised in submissions and by officers on the policy at deliberations held on 1st of June. Council resolved that the proposed amendments to the draft policy presented to Council be included in an updated policy for adoption. And that is what we've done today. Just noting one of these amendments is the new naming of the policy to be a date 2023. I'll go over the fees section as well. I'm just noting that Amanda will be available to answer any questions on the fees. So the fees are for development contributions that fund or partly fund the growth for capital budgets as listed in Schedule 2 of the policy that you have in front of you today. Items can be added to this list as part of budgeting processes for annual plans and long-term plans, which then changes the values of those DCs payable from that point onwards. As you all will know, the general cost recovery approach is for Council to recover 100% of the costs in relation to Precinct 4 and 5 growth works from DCs. So what we have done following on from deliberations is checked completely through the DC policy and ensured that the figures within are in alignment with the 1st of July to 30th of June figures presented to you today. And that included updates to Schedules 1, 2 and 3 to the policy. So I've also corrected a minor inaccuracy in the policy, which referred to the charges being PPI adjusted. It's been removed as PPI adjustments are only relevant when ensuring a previously calculated DC is adjusted for inflation. So it doesn't come into assessing what the DCs are for that year for new applications. So the options available to Council today in regard to the policy are to adopt it with an effective date 1st of July 2023, or to make further amendments before it's adopted. Just noting that if you do decide to make further changes, it may trigger the significance and engagement policy and we may be required to reconsult. In regard to the fees, we're asking you to adopt these today. They're calculated using a formula which Schedule 2 of the policy outlines, Schedule 1 of the policy outlines. And it includes the introduction of a 0.65 differential factor to be applied to the fielding intensification area catchment. So you can see that in the figures provided on the front page of the report. Community engagement, we undertook an extensive process of community engagement on the policy. You've been familiar with this through previous reports. Just noting that should Council choose to adopt the policy today, staff, namely the finance and consenting teams, will be trained on its administration so that everyone's on the same page and able to apply it with the community. That's basically all I had to outline today. So any questions from councillors are welcome. Otherwise, I'm pointing towards the recommendations of the report.
Thank you. Let's open that for questions, comments. Councillor Hadfield.
Yeah, just in terms of the intensification formula at 0.65, that was an awful long while ago that we actually had the discussions around this. And for some reason, I had a different figure in my head, but I'm just sort of looking for some. I for some reason had thought we had discussed 0.75, and it's noted at 0.65, and I'm just wondering if colleagues who were here when we had that discussion are as vague as I am about that.
So just confirming that 0.65 has been the factor all the way through. Shane and Hamish may like to speak to why that's selected as a differential.
If I remember right, we actually didn't start off with a factor. We started off with a lump sum. I think it was about $1,500 or something like that.
Right.
And that became a little bit unworkable due to the way development contributions are calculated. So we changed it to a factor. So that 0.65 was introduced into the draft policy that went out for consultation, so that it's more applicable in terms of the different scales of development contributions. So,
also, just referring you to clause 125 of the policy, it states that the 0.65 factor is applied to recognise that in most instances, there is no requirement to increase the capacity of the local infrastructure, but demand is still increased on the main pipelines and treatment plants. So that was behind the thinking as well.
Yeah.
I guess, and I think Shane's quite right. I think now that you mention it, I think the initial discussion was around a dollar figure, and that's fine. And I recall we had a conversation around this that we sort of pulled back on, given that we were, in my understanding, informed that actually in the intensification area, we were at capacity for stormwater, and that perhaps an intensification fee wasn't the appropriate thing right at this point in time. So I'm a little bit vague on that. So as well, and just while I'm turned on here, the other thing I couldn't find is actually what the reconsideration fee is. And I've had I tried to have a bit of a troll. That's on page 112 under 57. I've had a bit of a troll through the fees and charges, but I'm just a mere layperson, and I couldn't find what a reconsideration fee might be for developers. So I've got to have some clarification on that as well. Thanks.
So the reconsideration piece should be in our fees and charges. I'll have to get the team to check that, but that's where it should sit, not in the policy, but in the fees and charges. So if it's not there, then we need to bring it in.
I'd like to reiterate, I had a layperson's search.
Right.
And sometimes it's not actually that easy to find stuff through.
Yep.
Trolling through them.
So we'll check on that. In terms of the stormwater, and Hamish can sort of add a bit here. Yes, we did signal to council that there were some issues with filling stormwater, and that we were going to look into that in some detail. That investigation is still happening, and we felt that we didn't want to hold up the adoption of the development contribution as it was consulted, waiting for that stormwater work to continue. When that stormwater work is completed, if there are any amendments that we need to do, or we need to make any other considerations, we'll bring that through council. But we just didn't feel that we should hold up the adoption of the development contribution policy. It had been long enough anyway. So
thanks for that. So I guess what you're saying is that actually the 0.65 is not set in concrete, because it may well turn out that 0.65 isn't actually appropriate given some of the stormwater issues. And I guess that was where I was hunkering into at the beginning of the
but
question.
we haven't got the data yet to know whether that's right or wrong. So
so you're saying that's easily changed.
Yes.
Is what you're saying.
Yep, just bring it back through council and we amend the policy.
Thank you.
And also too, if you recall, it was across the three waters, and there wasn't that concern around the water or wastewater, so it was very much a stormwater matter. And just following up on the other point, Brittany's brought up the current fees and charges that we have, and fees and charges for the reconsideration of development contributions at 657 is stated in the adopted fees and charges.
That's just a lesson on how to find the way around the council website might be useful.
Okay,
Consult our lawyer.
we're happy for that.
Thank you, councillor Quigley.
Thank you, Your Worship. I've just realised that I should have declared a conflict of interest on this, so I should perhaps sit out.
Thank you. Councillor Quarry.
Thank you. I see there's a dollar value for these charges. Where does that dollar value come from? Is it an analysis of the capital cost that you're going to spend that year, and it's broken down to come into that charge, or how's that worked out, those actual figures?
Yep. So the development contribution fee is based on the development schedule of works, which is depending on the activity, a 10 to 20 year program of works. There's existing expenditure that's incurred. And so in some instances or some activities, there is a residual debt or loan that's attached to that. So it's a calculation done over a 20-year period, taking into account what's already been spent, what our projected spend is each year across the activities. There's an assumption around DC revenue. There's assumption around borrowing costs and interest charges. And then there's also the other assumption around the number of units that will be yielded through the development that's occurring over that period. So there is a level of subjectivity to it, but it's based on the best possible methodology that we can put in place. So effectively, total cost divided by total yield gives you an annual figure, taking into account all the other factors. So it's a reasonably sort of complicated calculation, and we do review it annually as part of setting the fees and charges, but also as part of the review of that DC schedule. And one of the things council has available to it is that flexibility to speed up or slow down development, depending on the market and depending on where council's financial position is sitting at. So it is reviewed regularly, and particularly through the LTP process as well.
And you have seen over the years where our expected development contribution revenue has been up and down. So for a number of years, it was below what we expected to collect. And that is simply because there wasn't enough development, wasn't as much development occurring as what we assumed. Last year, it was the opposite. We had a lot more revenue from development contributions than we assumed because we had the growth in the market around development. So we're a little bit of, that's what Hamish means by a little bit of subjectivity. We've got to assume what growth over the next 12 months will be, but we don't dictate it greatly. It's the market that does that. So we look at that through our assumptions, but sometimes it's a bit below and sometimes it's a bit above.
Just to confirm, Councillor Quarry, I think the policy does give really good transparency on the calculation in Schedule 1. So we take the numbers and do manual calculations in those tables, which is a real pain, but it's good for transparency. So you might want to have a look as bedtime reading.
I do.
And that should give some comfort that it's not just, we don't just make numbers up. There's a solid basis that sits in behind it, and it is reviewed regularly.
There'll be swings and roundabouts as well.
That's correct, yeah.
Thank you. Councillor Campbell.
Yeah, thank you. Question on the same line. I sort of question the value of including schedules 2 and 3 in the policy. As you've noted, the work detailed there goes right out to 2040 and beyond. It's a long way away. Does that, then hold us to having to do that work if we said that that's what's going to be done in 2040? I mean, it's a long, long way away. And I think by including those schedules there, it's confusing for the reader of the policy, and it would be better not included and just held in our back office files. And the calculation in Schedule 1 is valid, but it becomes a sort of an average. We don't know what work's going to be required at this point exactly in 2040, and our priorities may well change by then, undoubtedly will. So
if I could respond to that through your worship. It's a really good point in terms of, and you're right, we don't know exactly what we're going to do in 20 years' time. But the whole purpose of that is, as we sit here today, that is the intended plan. We have that mapped out growth, which aligns with our urban growth planning in those certain areas. As I said, we do have the ability to amend that schedule every year, and we relook at it and the implications of it as part of fee setting and rate setting every year through the annual plan. It's a deeper look every 3 years as part of the long-term plan. And the key thing is that if we take, because of the way we run the networks as a whole, if we take money for a water project and in 15 years' time we're going to do a particular piece of work, if we change that in 5 years' time, as long as we're still spending the money in that water area, the money we've taken is still to be invested in that network going forward. So we can't take a water income, the same as a targeted rate, and apply it to a rural roading project or a park somewhere in town. As long as we've got a rolling view of what our priorities are, it does sort of inform that transparency of what council's intending to do. But it doesn't mean that we're locked into doing that specific project in that particular year, but we are signalling that intent around that lead infrastructure across the three waters, roading and parks. So I think it is important to have that transparency in there.
Yeah, that came to the fro through a couple of years ago. We were challenged on our development contribution policy and the projects and the cost of projects and the like. So when there's an objection to development contribution, used to come to our hearings committee, but doesn't now. The government has independent development contribution commissioners. So that hearing took place, and we were upheld as being correct in terms of charging those development contributions. And the basis of the decision was around the transparency we had over the overall projects where the money was being spent, and the applicant who was challenging that, the commissioner basically said, well, it's there in black and white. You can see it. So therefore, what's the basis of your challenge? And it was dismissed. So when we're in this space, I would way sooner people see more than less, because it's sort of gives us the basis of reinforces the charging of the fees that we do.
And you are exactly right, though. There is the further out you get, the less certainty you have, but at least it's there for that transparency.
And Councillor Cameron, just to answer the second part of your question, there is a part of the LGA that requires we include these schedules within the policy.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
Thank you. Councillor Ford.
So mine goes back to the fielding intensification area matter. And when we put everything on hold pending stormwater research, I was comfortable with that approach. But I've actually had a fairly long time to think about it, because it has been a long time between drinks. And I'd like to think that the fielding stormwater challenge that we have at the moment, it's been to a large extent relatively recently identified. And I'd like to think that it's a relatively short-term issue that will be addressed, etc., and we'll be able to move on. Whereas the establishment of a fielding intensification area is a very logical long-term approach to urban growth. And I think as an incentive for infill is a good strategy going forward over a long period of time. So I'm very comfortable that it is appropriate to have the incentive, sort of, if you like, regardless that we have a bit of a stormwater challenge ahead of us, which we will sort out if we've still got anything to do with stormwater.
And I think, if I could, Your Worship, that's a really key point. So we have outlined a proposed capital investment program for stormwater improvements in fielding. Council is yet to fully commit to that by way of a long-term plan. So I'll park that for your future consideration. And also too, as you say, the decision-making around stormwater network investment may or may not sit with this council in the future. So there is a risk to that, but at this point in time, that risk is within our control.
To a degree, because under the current legislation that was recently passed, anything additional in those three water spaces has to be approved by the National Transition Unit or the DIA to be included in our long-term plan. We'll see what pops out in a few weeks' time with amended legislation. But at the moment, that's where that sits. And we've recently just had to send our adopted annual plan off to the DIA for approval to show them that we didn't introduce more expenditure in the Three Waters area than what they approved.
And another layer on that too is, as we've been working through with the National Transition Unit, putting forward sort of proposed asset management plans for the next 20 to 30 years, including things like that capital investment program has gone into that. So it hasn't been endorsed or approved by DIA, but it's certainly, we've put it forward in terms of our intent. So to have that locked into the long-term plan and then through the NTU is part of the process we have to work through. So.
If I may just comment on that, surely logic would tell you that whoever's in charge of stormwater, where there's a stormwater problem, you want to fix it. So whether it's council or whether it's a new entity, I have confidence that our fielding stormwater challenges are a relatively short-term issue compared to the long-term advantages of good urban planning, which includes an incentive for infill development.
Thank you. Councillor Underwood.
Thank you. You mentioned transparency of the policy, and that's good, but I think there needs to be further transparency in that people are directed to the policy. We managed to go through a subdivision in 2021, I think. Didn't even know there was a policy, and despite the fact that we attended a pre-consent meeting here. Yeah. And I'm just asking whether, you know, people could be directed to that policy at those meetings and also on any paperwork that refers to the development contribution. I remember paying it and seeing the paper asking for it, but there was no direction to the policy there either. So that's just a suggestion from me to improve transparency.
So we are, Brittany alluded to it briefly before around, we're going to put all of our staff that deal in this area through a quite comprehensive training. And some of that will be led out by Shannon, and some will be led out in-house, but the whole idea is for us to get a lot smarter in the space and to do exactly what you're suggesting.
No surprises.
Might still be a surprise, but we'll try and help people through the delight of the surprise.
Yeah, and I think noting Councillor Headfield's comments too, in terms of the ease to navigate some of our information, that's worth, we'll take that on board too, in terms of that ease of doing business with council.
Sure. No, carry on while you've got the floor.
There was just one more question that Amanda might be able to answer. With the loans funding ahead of time, this growth work, when the DCs trickle in, I assume that the intent is to repay debt as soon as possible, but obviously you can't put little bits and pieces in. What's sort of the policy? Do you save it up and put a lump sum in at a various time during the year?
So Councillor, what we do at the moment is we do a reconciliation and we say how much have we spent for that year, how much has come in, and therefore how much loans do we need to draw? Because in 1 year we have never had enough that will repay what we've spent in that year, plus have enough to pay down, because we're doing so much investment up front. So at the moment we have had a year or two where the amount came in did actually offset the amount we spent that year, so we didn't draw anything, but we haven't yet, from what I recall, had enough that comes in and pays not only that year's worth, but some previous years. So it's actually accumulating slowly as we go along.
So there's no debt reduction at all from the DCs?
At the moment.
Thank you.
If I could add to that, to your worship, I mean, you look at the work that we're doing in Precinct 4, and we've got a report coming later in the agenda, and the committed works in Precinct 5 in terms of Turners Road. We are spending, you know, a reasonable amount of money, and we are deliberately taking a lead in the space. So it's not, don't be surprised if we're spending more than we're getting in the short term, but if you balance it over a 10 to 20 year period, you'll have your swings and roundabouts there. And so the investment now for the future is a very deliberate decision of this council. Yep.
Thank you, Councillor Bell.
Kia ora, Shane. I just have a question. How do we compare with our DC charges to other districts? Where do we sit? Is it a bit like our rates? Or a little bit
No,
higher?
It's very hard to compare because, you know, those figures are based on the growth works that we need to do, and then other councils, the type of growth works they need to do is quite different. So
The calculation model will be different for every district, possibly because it's their own, but are we still seen as higher because the
I know the
community?
city's
go-
higher than us, quite a bit higher than us, actually.
Okay.
Yep. But they've got some real challenges with their infrastructure, so their capital cost is a lot higher, which drives their cost higher. So
Will the fees go higher once a Three Waters transition happens with our DC? That might be a silly question.
I'll give you my take on that would be our DC will reduce because we won't be probably
But
taking.
it'll go
the
to
Three
another
Waters,
space.
but the person paying the bill will pay the same or more because the cost will still be incurred.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay. Thank
Yeah.
you.
there is some talk that councils will still collect the DC for the Three Waters, but we will then have to pass it on to them.
Why would we still collect?
Because someone's got to pay for the growth works, but we would pass it to the entity.
So then that means that they'll be paying double then, wouldn't it? No?
No.
It'll be one entity collecting on behalf of the other.
We
not
would
both.
just be a
okay.
collection agency, but we've already signalled that that's not council's role.
Right.
We're
And
not,
they've flagged
we're
that
not
with
a
water.
collection agency.
They've flagged that with water rates as well, and that's a live conversation. Well, it will be a live conversation.
But they did sneak it into the legislation, so there you go.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Councillor Quarry.
Thank you. I'd like you to take you to page 102 and the heading specified productive rural land.
Councillor, is there a clause of the policy we could refer to?
Sorry?
Is there a clause of the policy we could refer to? The numbered.
They don't have the same agenda as us.
Well, page 6 on the, it's either page 6 or page 102, page 6
of the policy.
of the policy.
It's in the definitions.
Oh, okay.
Specified productive rural land.
Yeah, and the heading is specified productive rural land. I see no reason why this should be in there. And in particular, paragraph B, which relates to the developer having to have a register against the title of the lot of land as a land covenant. What would be the cost of that covenant and why should it be there at all?
So this was a way of addressing issues like the rural sector where there was an existing piece of land and it was subdivided, created under the existing policy, an extra unit of demand, but there was no intention to, at this stage, develop the balance lot. And so therefore, the covenant was a mechanism putting on title to alert any further purchase so that if any development was to occur in that balance lot, then the development contribution would be payable to council.
But a development could take place on a number of undeveloped titles. So why should there be a covenant put on it when the land next door hasn't got a covenant on it and the procedure to build or develop is still there?
So I think we've had this discussion previously when Shannon was here, and her recommendation was that where council is able, it should clearly signal on title where there is an entitlement owed to council. And we have in the past, some years ago now though, been caught out by sales of land where development contributions were owed, but the vendor did not disclose it to the purchaser. And then the purchaser said, not my problem, it's the vendor's problem. The vendor disappeared and the council got left with no one paid the development contribution. And it was, a couple of $100,000. That happened twice, which is why we moved to be about to put in place those protections for council where we can, some places we can't, that alert prospective purchasers to the fact that DCs are owed to council. And we don't only do it for DCs, we do it for other costs as well.
But that, to follow that through then, that an existing title should have a covenant put on it so that it signifies to any future purchaser that there is no DCs paid on it. So why should that be any different to an existing title?
Because the title that has been subdivided, we have the ability to require it, where we can't go out to all the existing titles and say, you have to put a covenant on it.
And that's my whole point, that to get that title, you force the landowner to pay for a covenant which he doesn't want, he doesn't require, he receives nothing for it. And what is the cost of that covenant?
It's not about existing landowners, it's about protecting council from the ability to be able to pay what is due to council if that development occurs.
But let the buyer beware. If you buy a piece of land and you wish to develop, it is up to the purchaser to decide as to what his liability is. So it is let the buyer beware with every other business transaction that takes place. Why should the council be any different in forcing a covenant? And the cost of that covenant could be half the cost of the DCs.
No, it's not.
Well, how much is it?
About $250.
That's not what you told me before.
No, that was it. No, you're getting confused with what's required under the existing policy versus that. The existing policy requires a development agreement. Development agreements are expensive because they require mortgages to be put in place. In other words, a first lien, whereas the new policy talks about a covenant, which is simply a document put against title. It's the lawyers do a one pager and it's registered against title, and it's just the registration costs, really.
And what that gives is when you talk about buyer beware, when they're doing their due diligence, it means that as they search the property title, there is a very clear requirement for that development contribution to be paid. Otherwise, it's not captured anywhere.
Yeah.
So it is part of the buyer's due diligence as part of their buyer beware and the seller's obligation. So the council doesn't miss out.
Councillor Hadfield.
Yeah, thanks, Your Worship. Actually, I just wanted to hone back to some of the comments that Councillor Campbell made. In reflection, I think Brittany may have answered it, but actually, when I looked at Councillor Campbell's comments and assuming that DCs actually form part of the of our estimates of projected capital and operational expenditure, I wondered if we went through with that, whether we would be in breach of section 101B4A1 of the Local Government Act.
That's a very good question, Councillor.
All I can assure council is this policy's been robustly reviewed by Shannon and her team for compliance, in particular with the requirements of the LTA. Happy to get that checked, but I'd be surprised if there's a discrepancy among.
What was the section of the LGA referred to?
I think I know the answer. 101B4A1.
Okay, so while that's being looked up.
Yeah.
That section of the Local Government Act refers to the infrastructure strategy as opposed to the development contributions policy.
So the question I had is, given that development contributions are essentially and a great extent going into infrastructure.
So the infrastructure.
So the question is there a link or not?
Yeah. So when council puts its infrastructure strategy together, a big part of that is mapping its capital investment program, its renewal program. That capital investment is funded through loans that we take out and or development contributions. The renewals program is funded through your depreciation take. So bringing all of that together, it gives a clear picture of what the council's 30-year infrastructure spend and investment will look like. And as you've quoted in the legislation, it talks about the first 10 years and then 5-year blocks after that through to 30 years. So they are absolutely linked in terms of the DC schedule and the infrastructure strategy. Yes.
Thank you, Councillor Ford.
Thank you. Two quick comments. One, re the land covenants.
Land covenants are really common because they are part of buyer beware. So without them, how would the buyer ever know, particularly if you had an unscrupulous vendor? And so I do support the policy of having a covenant. The other one, Councillor Bill, was I asked your question about how do we rate in terms of the amount of development contributions some years ago, to be fair. And the answer that I recall quite well from then was that some councils have no development contributions. They were generally councils where there was no development taking place. And so they saw development contributions as a disincentive to development. Horowhenua was one of those, and now they do have development contributions, as I understand it, because there's a lot of development taking place. And when I asked, Manawatu district was high on a regional basis, but about average on a national basis. So it's just a little bit historical, but it's probably still that bit of a guide.
Still
That's right.
valid. Councillor Blackmore.
Thank you. I just wanted to maybe add a point of view on the covenant as well. I think while the chief executive talked about council getting caught in the middle or perhaps losing out, I think we need to remember that council's operating on behalf of the wider community. So it's actually the wider community that misses out on that development contribution.
Good point. Thank you. Right, so have we exhausted our questions and comments?
Surely
not. So if we go back to page 88, there are two recommendations there. And I'm happy to take a mover and a seconder for those, please.
Could you remind me the page number?
Oh, page 88. In fact, I'm happy to move that the council adopt the Development and Financial Contributions Policy 2023 as provided in Annex 1 to this report, including Schedules 1, 2 and 3 with an effective date of the 1st of July 2023. 2, that council adopts the development contributions fees GST inclusive for the financial year 1 July 2023 to the 30th of June 2024 as outlined below. Can I have a seconder, please? Councillor Blackmore, thank you. Any final discussion? Put the motions. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried. Thank you. Really good, robust discussion throughout this process, and it comes into effect 1st of July, so it will be interesting to see the feedback that we get from developers and those using the new policy. So thank you to the team for all of the work that's been done on that. I think with that, we've earned a cup of tea. So let's take a break, please, and be back at 1:15.
Did somebody else?
No.
Sorry, I should have told him to go.
Steroid injections. Yeah. When that happens, yeah, it's not good. So, and she's a friend of my wife's. Yeah. Yeah, so. Don't know.
Okay, so we will reconvene our meeting. And we are at 11.4 on page 156, amendment to the alcohol fees, part of the fees and charges for 23-24. Welcome Ash and Amanda.
Thank you. There's very little to say. This is just unfortunately one of those things that has to come back to you to adopt because of the legislation, but essentially it's just a rounding issue. And a few of those fees are off by 20 cents, 50 cents. We can't change the fees, they're set by legislation. So,
right, thank you. Councillor Hadfield.
Yeah, thanks, Your Worship. I'd just actually like to move that the council adopts the amended alcohol licensing fees for 23-24.
Thank you. Seconded by Councillor Short. Any further questions, comments?
Sure, we could have a half-hour discussion on
or not. Right, I'll put the Councillor Underwood.
Just interesting that they had been released. They're not going to be released on 1st of July, is that right?
yeah, so I'll update the website a few days before that.
So what would have been the process if they had already been released?
They actually don't change. So if they had been, well, they're always from 1st of July anyway. And I don't think, I think most of these were rounded up. I doubt anybody would have objected to the fact that we went, oh, sorry, we're going to charge you a bit less. So it would have, yeah. If we'd got some a complaint, that's about the only thing that could have happened. And I can't see anyone complaining that the fees have just gone down by a few cents. So, yeah.
Thank you. So I have a mover and a seconder. I'll put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Against? Motion is carried. Thank you. Moving to page 160, 11.5. This is the review of remuneration for the CEDA directors. So thank you, Marie and Lynn. I guess the only comment I've got is that we're not seeking a decision by council today.
Yes, thank you, Worship. You're correct. This is a report that has been prepared by Palmy Council, and that's one of the things that we did check with them. And under the charter that we have with CEDA, we are to receive the report, not approve the remuneration. Having said that, we have all agreed that at the time, this time next year, when we consider the statement of expectations for CEDA, and we would at that time hopefully be looking for the statement of intent to be 3 years in advance, we might at that time consider the remuneration for the directors, and as is discussed in this report, perhaps look at the number, again, look at the number of directors that are actually appointed to CEDA.
Thank you. Let's, well, first of all, Marie, was there anything else on this report you wanted to highlight?
Just that the rates have not changed since October 2015, except an increase from 5 to 6 directors in 2018, just making the whole remuneration pool up to 155k.
Thank you. So open it up for questions, comments. Councillor Hadfield.
Yeah, thanks, Your Worship. Just for clarification, is a remuneration pool actually set, and then it's up to the CEDA board what they do with it?
Correct.
So that's really our only concern, is the level of the remuneration pool.
Yes.
Yep. Everything else, I think, on the report is self-explanatory, and we're not asked for any decision, so it's actually probably not from my view, there's nothing to discuss other than the fact that we want to receive the report.
We have a question here, Councillor Shaw.
Thank you. It's just a query, really, just looking at the table of the other organisations that it's been compared to. I was interested to see the chair of Wellington's paid quite a bit less than the chair of recommended to the chair of CEDA. I just wondered how many staff would CEDA have? I would imagine Wellington would have a lot more.
So staff, CEDA has 14 staff at present.
Thank you.
I think they've got some vacancies at the moment.
Thank you. If there's nothing further, Councillor Hadfield, do you want to move the recommendation?
Yes,
page 160.
Yeah, happy to move, Your Worship, that the council receive the report titled Review of Remuneration for Directors of the Central Economic Development Agency.
Thank you. Do I have a seconder, please? Councillor Campbell. Put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against? Motion is carried. Thank you. Right, page 167, 11.6. These are putting on record the submissions that have been made by the council in the previous month. And I have to say that the submissions panel group, focus group, whatever we call ourselves, has been working away pretty hard. It's just ongoing, the number of reforms and reviews that the expectation is that we submit to. So we've had to make some pretty strategic decisions around which are the key ones, which have the most impact on our community. And the discussions that we've had have been really good, robust discussions, pros and cons. And I just and I reflect on Councillor Bell comments that you made at the discussion the other day. You know, it is easy and challenging to get into the science of some of these submissions and the topics that we're talking about. But at the end of the day, we're here to submit on what is best for our community. And I think that helps. But having said that, we have some really good conversations, really good emails going backwards and forwards. So I just want to thank Lisa and Kimmy for the work that you're doing around in this space. It's outstanding. So I'll hand it over to you.
Okay, thank you, Your Worship. Good morning, councillors. Just a thanks to Matt Pike-Dash, our strategy administrator, who prepared the report on my behalf. And yeah, as you've outlined, there's 3 submissions attached to this one. There's the Charging Our Future, proposed changes to the building levy, and consenting improvements for renewable electricity generation and transmission. The first and the third were prepared by Kimmy, and I was involved in the changes to the building levy. So if there are any technical questions on any of the submissions, we'll probably have to defer to Kimmy to answer those. But yeah, they're just tabled for your information, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you. And I'm pleased to see that following council adopting these, we are then putting them out into on council website so that our community is informed about, so that they can see the topics that we are submitting on. Any questions or comments? Councillor Underwood.
The third one, the electricity one, reading through that, I'm just wondering, is it the intent to allow solar panels and windmills on highly productive land? Is that the intent of that policy?
Probably need to double check with Kimmy, I'm sorry, but I think I wouldn't want to put you wrong, so I'll follow up with Kimmy and get back to you on that.
Yeah, we're just reading your response in here, and just I thought it intimated that, but I could be wrong. That's why I was just wanting clarification.
Sure, I'll get that clarification.
Thank you, Councillor Hadfield.
Yeah, thanks, Your Worship. Yeah, Yeah, definitely on the, I had a bit to say on some of these, as you can probably imagine, colleagues. But the one thing I was quite pleased about in the third one was the inclusion of regional economic generation. And I did raise, I think, with members, the Puha Dam is a prime example of a small regional electricity generation scheme that not only provided an extra $125 million worth of economic development to the Timaru region, it improved aquatic life in the river, recreational facilities, and actually generation. And it's my view that often the solar and wind energy seem to take preference to potential hydro schemes, which I think, of course, is fundamentally wrong because we've got a great resources. So I was really pleased to see that included. But just one other point, if I could make, and I might have gone to school at the wrong school, but when you sign off the letter, Your Worship, I would have thought it would have been Helen Warboys JP, because you're the JP, necessarily not just the mayor as the JP. And I would have thought actually the correct way of finishing the letter off would be Helen Warboys JP, mayor. Just a little technical thing. I probably got caned for getting that wrong at school.
Thank you. We will follow that up because that is how all correspondence has been finished. So we'll follow that one up. But any other questions in regards to the submissions? Councillor Quigley.
This one's for Lisa. You'll know this one.
Hopefully.
Building levy. Can you just flesh that out a bit? What does it actually look like?
Sure, just one
What are the
moment.
changes going to be?
I'll just bring up the submission, just one moment.
So MB gave us a list of questions that they wanted us to respond to. So we went through each of those and made a comment to those. I guess the interesting thing will be is how much notice they actually take of the feedback we give them and whether other councils are in line with our comments.
Okay, so at the moment, building works that are over a certain, have a certain value, and they're charged a building levy. And at the moment, the threshold is quite low and they're looking at increasing the threshold. So only the buildings of higher value are being triggered by that. There are some changes also to the calculations that they're making, and just see, I've got a better summary just a moment. I've sort of, once I've completed, I kind of park it out of my brain. So sorry about that. Okay, so okay, so they're increasing the levy threshold from 20,444 to 65,000 and reducing the levy rate from $1.75 to $1.48 per $1,000. So depending on the value they calculate that levy, and that essentially goes back to the building regulatory functions that MB performs. So they use that money to fund, you know, their responsibilities. So they found they've got a bit of a surplus. So they were looking at reducing down the levy that they're charging and increasing the threshold to capture less. And they're also looking at investing some of that levy back into research and into different things that will improve the building profession. So yeah, they're looking at, they've sort of recognised that the levy's building up a bit too high. So they're looking at making some changes to it.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any further questions, comments? Councillor Underwood.
Thank you, because you made a comment before, I think, which was similar to the question I want to ask, do you get written responses to these submissions? And also, are you aware of any changes to the legislation that have been a reaction to your submissions?
We do sometimes get emails back, particularly from the ministries, to let us know that the summary of submissions is available, which sometimes includes analysis of the submissions received and their responses to those. And then when things are finalised, we often get another email that says, this is the legislation's adopted now or whatever. But we don't get sort of personalised responses that set out the changes that have been made in light of our submission personally. So it's sort of more as a collective. So you have to kind of read through to try and figure out what changes have been made. I guess in terms of the three waters, there were some changes with their redirection into the 10 entities. So I'd like to say that, sometimes things do get tweaked, but I think, often things are pretty set before consultation. So yeah, depends how optimistic or pessimistic you wish to be, really.
Thank you. It's a good question, but I think the key thing is that it's important on behalf of our community that we do put forward our views to ensure that it's whether or not it's taken any notice of. But if you don't take the opportunity, Councillor Ford.
Just a lot of the submissions go to select committees, which are of course across Parliament. So even if the government of the day is not picking up on our submissions, often the other parties do, and can sometimes become future policy. So I certainly take the view of you, if you don't have your say, you can't complain down the track. But so
I fully agree. And also it's on record for our community to
Yes.
see that we submit.
That's our view, yes.
I think that's the most important bit, making sure the community see that we're actively participating in things that affect them.
Yes. Yep. Okay, so nothing further. So we have the recommendation on page 167. If I could have a mover and a seconder, please. Councillor Hadfield.
Yeah, I will move that, Worship, but I will note also that actually, whilst we do stuff that we believe is right for the community, we're also obliged to actually represent the views of the community, whether they may be considered right or wrong by others as well. It's important to actually realise that actually that, in my view, has as much weighting as doing what others might perceive as maybe the right thing. But on that note, I'm happy to move that the council receives and notes the following submissions lodged on behalf of the Manawatu District Council between the 29th of April 23 and the 31st of May 23. 1, charging our future strategy. 2, proposed changes to the building levy. 3, consenting improvements for renewable electricity generation and transmission.
Thank you. Seconded by Councillor Underwood. Thank you. No further discussion. Councillor Ford.
Yes, I was going to ask Councillor Hadfield to elaborate on his comments just prior to moving the motion, but I've decided not to.
Your Worship, I'd just like to advise the Deputy Mayor that he's very wise.
Thank you.
He knows that.
And from those of us who sit on the submissions panel, very wise not to pursue that. We would be here for a long time. But I must say we have had some really good discussions. So have a mover and a seconder. I'll put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried. And just want to thank the team, Lisa, you and your team, and also elected members that sit on that panel and the work that's involved there. Thank you. So we come to item 13. This is our public excluded business. And I will move that the public be excluded from the following parts of the proceedings of this meeting, namely confirmation of minutes, Fielding Civic Centre appointment of trustees, contract award for road construction, open spaces, maintenance contract, and the renewal of the building services contract. Have a mover, have a seconder. Councillor Ford, put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Against? Motion is carried. Thank you.